Thanks, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. Before we start, can I remind everyone present that the meeting will be recorded via the internet and this recording archived for future viewing? Could I also ask all participants please to mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid the background noise? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if I can see you on screen, or use the raise hand function? Could you also please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function? For the sake of the recording, the chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues or to grab the attention of the chair or democratic service officer. And if any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or democratic officer know. If they have a webcam, then try turning that off, as sometimes that will help with the broadband. So welcome to the meeting tonight. Can I just pass you over to Amy, who just wanted to she just wanted to speak to you all first. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just a very quick message for the committee. We are looking to do a review of the Town and Community Councils and Vale of Glamorgan Council Charter, and we'd very kindly would accept any volunteers who would like to be on the working group from our Town and Community Councils. So if any of the Town and Community Council representatives on the committee would like to be involved in the Charter review, please could they drop me a message? And I'll get back to them then with further details. Thank you.
Okay, so to our agenda. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I don't have any, but Amy, do you have any, please?
I do, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Aviott and Councillor Lynch-Wilson as elected members this evening. In terms of Town and Community Council representatives, we've had apologies from Councillor Thomas from Lantwit Town Council, Councillor Cuddy from Penarth Town Council, Councillor Phillips from Peterston Super Ely Community Council, Councillor Marks from Mickleston Le Pit with Leckwith Community Council, and also we've had apologies from Mr Morris from Colwynstone Community Council. However, his colleague is on the line with us this evening, and also Councillor S. Toker from St Athan Community Council has provided apologies, but similarly the substitute representative is with us this evening. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of July 2022. Can I have acceptance of these minutes? If anybody wants to raise anything, if they'd like to raise their hand. If I don't see any raised hands, then I take it that we're all happy with these minutes.
I'd appreciate a seconder if that's okay, if they could indicate, please.
Could I have a seconder, please, to accept the minutes?
I'm happy to second. It's Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any declarations, please? Councillor Campbell.
Hello, Chair. I believe that we'll be discussing the community review this evening. I just want to declare that I was in the meeting of the community review.
Okay, thank you very much. No other declarations of interest? No. Okay, agenda item 4 is South Wales Fire and Rescue Service presentation and update, and we have Hugh Jakeway this evening. So good evening, Hugh.
Good evening, Chair. Evening, members. Got myself and Chris Barton, the Fire Authority's Treasurer. The Chair of the Fire Authority, Councillor Steve Bradwick, regrettably his hospital appointment is overrunning and he won't be able to join us, but we do have Councillor Pam Drake, who is also the Deputy Chair of the Fire Authority. I understand, Chair, we've got 45 minutes for the presentation. We'll run through the presentation, which will be a bit two-part, and then we'll be available to take questions at the end. And if Councillor Drake would like to summarise at the end or take any questions, then we can do that. So if it's okay with you, Chair, it's okay if I share a presentation?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that available for members to see, Chair?
Yeah, I can see it. I hope everybody else can. Raise a hand if you can't see it, please.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll press on. So South Wales Fire and Rescue Service was come to fruition on local government reorganisation back in 1996. So when the 8 county councils went to 22 local authorities, the 8 county council fire brigades then got amalgamated into 3 combined fire authorities covering Wales. So there's a North Wales, there's a Mid and West Wales, and there's us here then down in the south. And as you can see on the map in front of you, we cover from Monmouthshire in the east over to Bridgend in the west, and from the south, from the Vale of Glamorgan all the way up to short of Merthyr and to south of Brecon. That's our geographical space. We serve 10 local authorities, and we have different fire stations in different places according to risk. Some of our fire stations are crewed 24/7, so there's a crew available 24/7, and others are on what we call on-call availability. Those on-call firefighters live within approximately 5 minutes of the fire station. Should a fire call come in for that area, they would respond to the station on an alerter, very much like we see with our RNLI colleagues on a lifeboat. They would respond to the station, take the emergency vehicles, which one they would require, and then out to an emergency incident. The stations in the Vale are Cowbridge and Lantwick Major, which are on-call stations. And then at Barry, we've got a shared facility, which is a fire station and shared with our ambulance colleagues, and it's a whole time and on-call complement there and a special rescue facilities. And then we have Penarthur, which is a single pump whole time station, which has a boat capability for Cardiff Bay. We have a training centre at Cardiff Gate, which is PFI, which I know Chris will touch on later. We have our headquarters site here at Llantrisant, which is where I am this evening. We have an occupational health unit looking after all our staff's health, safety and well-being, and we have about 1,850 staff here in South Wales. And then we have a control room, which is a joint control room between ourselves and Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service, and that's co-located with South Wales Police in the Bridgend headquarters site as well. So that's very much our locations. There's 47 fire stations across South Wales and a plethora of operational vehicles, 60 fire engines, and equally as many special appliances such as high reach specialist rescues from boats and ropes as well. And I'll put myself on mute and pass over to Chris.
Thank you, Hugh. I'm not seeing a slide move on, Hugh. Thank you very much, and evening members. Just wanted to run through some of the basic financial information behind the Fire Authority to give members an understanding of it, and then perhaps a little bit about what our current challenges are. The same map that Hugh showed, the 10 constituent councils there. South Wales Fire Service is actually funded from the 10 constituent councils. So every year, each of the councils pays for a proportion of the fire service, and that proportion is based on the population within each of the areas. So you'll see there that some of the figures are larger. For instance, Cardiff, the biggest authority, obviously pays over £18 million, whereas yourselves, you are about 8 to 9% of the population of the South Wales area. And pay just under £7 million for the current financial year. We spend just under £80 million a year, so that's the total amount of the revenue budget each year. The Fire Authority is not in control of the mechanism as to how we are paid for. It's set down in statute. So when the authority was created, the statutory instrument actually decided that the cost of the Fire Authority would be shared on a population basis. Key thing about that is the population figures you see on that screen are the same ones that are used in the local government settlement that determine each authority's resources. So if your population changes, goes up, then your resources from Welsh Government go up. Similarly, you pay a bit more to the Fire Authority, and of course vice versa. So that's the basic background as to how the Fire Authority is funded. I'm hoping Hugh can move us on to the next slide. I mentioned the revenue budget is just under £80 million. That's the current year's analysis of the budget. The vast majority of what we spend is on our employees. So that's the operational employees who attend instance, our control centre, but obviously some support staff as well who support the operation of the fire service. And like most organisations, really, that reflects a spread of expenditure across the different types of areas that we spend money on. So Hugh's already outlined the premises, the fire stations, our PFI training centre and our headquarters that we have to obviously fund. We spend a fair bit on training each year. I'm sure you won't find difficulty in understanding that the nature of the incidents that our firefighters have to attend requires a significant training overhead to keep them ready to respond to whatever life throws at them. Like all organisations, we have a supplies budget that pays for things like our operational equipment, but also things like our insurance costs and stuff like that. So there's a multiplicity of items within that heading. And obviously there's a transport cost as well to keep our appliances on the road in terms of the attending incidents and so on. In terms of our capital programme, we have a capital programme. It's funded partially by grant from Welsh Government. We do get some grants from Welsh Government for some of our kit and equipment and premises. But anything that we don't get grant for, we have to fund internally from the revenue budget.
Unknown participant is now joining.
So we generally borrow for the purposes of funding our capital programme, and that capital financing cost there you see is the revenue budget implication of that. So it's meeting the loan repayments and interest that we actually incur in funding our capital. Next slide, please, Hugh. Sorry, Chair, we do seem to have an issue with how these slides moved on, so I apologise for that in advance.
No problem.
What we've done on these slides is just as well try and give a picture of what's been happening over the last few years. So this slide actually tracks the changes in council budgets over the sort of period from when austerity began, really, back at the beginning of the 2010s. And also the changes in the South Wales Fire Service levy that we ask our local authorities to fund. The key point here is the authority, when it meets and when it considers its budget, actually is very cognizant of the settlements that local authorities have had. And hopefully what that chart shows you is that the green lines, which are the sort of average changes in local authority funding over those years, are slightly bigger than the red lines when it goes up. The red lines being the fire service budget increase, and similarly when resources are going down, what we try and do as a fire service, we try and reduce our budget by a figure which is greater than any reduction in the local authority arena. So our members and the fire authority more generally tries to ensure that we don't ask for resources which are outside of the parameters which councils are working within themselves. The obvious outlier to that was the current financial year. Councils received a significant increase in resources, around 10% from Welsh Government in the current year. They increased council tax as well, of course, which was a slightly lesser figure than that. The fire service only actually asked for just over 2% additional resources, and I think that again hopefully demonstrates that we only ask for what we need. We don't simply reflect our budgets in whatever is happening in the wider world. Next slide, please, Hugh, if we can. The next slide is a bit of a benchmarking exercise. It's rather difficult to benchmark fire services in Wales because there are only 3 fire authorities, as Hugh's already mentioned. But what that shows is the cumulative change in our revenue budgets across the period. And hopefully, again, it demonstrates, South Wales being the red line on there, that we do try and keep our budgets as low as possible, and certainly have been more successful than the other 2 fire authorities in Wales over this period. Next slide, please, Hugh. Perhaps not unsurprisingly, the biggest challenge we have at the moment is around pay inflation. And I'm sure you'll all realise that everybody in the public sector and indeed across the whole economy is suffering this problem. When we set our budget for the 21-22 financial year, we did actually over provide for our pay inflation in our budget, and the result of that was we underspent by quite a bit, around £3.8 million in 21-22. Next slide, please, Hugh. The downside of that is that in 22-23, of course, we cut our pay budget provision down, knowing that we'd underspent in the previous year. What we did when we set the budget, of course, we set it based on what everybody thought the economy was going to be doing significantly in 22-23. We're now looking at quite significantly higher pay inflation settlements. Our settlements are not yet agreed with our employees, but obviously we're expecting costs to go up, and we think that we will be overspent in the current year between £1 and £3 million, depending on what those pay settlements are. Next, please, Hugh. And the strategy to fund this is that we will be using last year's underspend to obviously meet any overspend in the current year. We strive as a fire authority to ensure that we never come back to the authorities in year and ask them for more money. Obviously, we recognise that would be really unhelpful for councils. We set the budget at the beginning of the year, like you set your budget at the beginning of the year. And once you've set council tax, it would be really difficult if the fire authority came back in year and said, well, actually, we need more money. So we will be intended to use reserves to actually meet the overspend in the current year. Next slide, Hugh. And then that leaves, of course, next year, which is the big challenge, and effectively we'll be rolling up 2 years pay inflation because of that temporary funding arrangement, and we could be seeing our pay bill go up by around 10%. It's a big question, as I'm sure it is for you. Nobody really understands what pay is going to do this year, let alone next year. So it's something we continue to monitor. Next slide, Hugh, please. So this is our medium-term financial plan situation at the moment. This was reported to our Fire Authority meeting in September. You'll see at the top of that list there, the pay inflation is the big number, potentially a cost of around £6 million plus over 2 years, which is going to increase our budget substantially. But not only that, we're suffering the same sort of inflation increases that the economy is in general. So we're seeing increases in energy costs, we're seeing increases in fuel costs across the piece, and that is all adding to the pressure on our budget. And at the moment, our medium-term financial plan shows total cost pressures for next year of around 8.4 million, and that equates to a 10.6% increase in our budget. Now, as I've said to all councils, I don't expect anybody to jump for joy over that. It is a figure that we are working to get down, but there are some uncertainties within that. I would hope that it's certainly not going to be bigger than that figure when eventually we agree our budget. The budget itself will not be agreed until February next year. Next slide, Hugh, please. The rest of the medium-term financial plan, because we're assuming the economy and pay inflation and price inflation is going to return to normal after 23-4. I know that's a big assumption. We are hoping that our increases will then fall back to more normal levels in future years to come. And a final slide here. And this just puts the timescales on our processes within South Wales Fire Service. We commenced these visits and briefings to councils on the 17th of October. We will be working towards getting the budget figure finalised for a consultation process at our December meeting, and then a consultation process following on from Christmas into the new year. And the 13th of February, the Fire Authority will meet to actually consider and approve its 23-24 budget. So those are the timelines on our decision making. I have, for information for members, already shared these numbers with the Section 151 officers of the constituent councils, so they're aware of these numbers in terms of your budget planning exercises. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Chair, I'll take members on now to the operational aspect and the performance aspect of the service. I think most people will be familiar with our operational response, so bright red shiny fire engines, blue flashing lights, and actually firefighters putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff. But there are some other far more technical issues that we deal with and respond to in our communities as well. So on the slide deck in front of you, you can see firefighters working off a boat. We have now in Wales got a statutory duty to respond to flooding and inland water. An extremely technical place for our firefighters to work, and the training and kit and equipment requirements for that are quite extensive as well. You can see the joint fire control. We work very in a collaborative manner with all blue light partners, and that is shown by the estate that we share, not only the police, but particularly in Lantwick, Major and Barry, where we co-locate with ambulance colleagues, police colleagues and Coast Guard colleagues as well. We do, as a fire and rescue service, regrettably suffer with deliberate fire setting. So 80% of fires that our firefighters attend have been deliberately set. And that ranges from anything from grassland, wildfires, mountains to buildings and alike as well. Road traffic collisions is something that you'd be familiar that we attend. We work again interagency at the roadside to free trap victims so they can receive the appropriate medical attention. And we also provide medical support to our NHS colleagues, particularly the ambulance service, in the removal of bariatric patients and casualties from their homes so they can go into hospital and receive the care that they need as well. A very technical aspect that also. And using very similar skills as well is that we've developed over the years a large animal rescue capability. And the essence behind that, and whilst it's not a statutory duty, it's a discretionary duty that we do apply, or the Fire Authority applies and asks the service to deliver, is the fact that many large animals find themselves in precarious positions, and if we didn't, with the right skills, equipment, and training, enter that event, then we have found that the owners would put themselves in greater danger, and therefore we would be looking at a rescue of people instead. I think the aspect of the service which is probably not that well known is our community safety. So where we work in a preventative, early intervention and an education field, it's around promoting good citizenship and changing human behaviour so our communities are safer from having an emergency than having an emergency. So we were the first fire and rescue service in the world to be accredited with the White Ribbon. It's something that we are proud of, but what we aren't proud of is that the prevalence of domestic abuse and sexual violence across our communities. We've already heard through COVID that the incidence of domestic abuse and sexual violence has risen, and therefore we are very proactive. Regrettably, we have had incidents across South Wales where arson and fire has been used as a weapon by the perpetrator, and regrettably we've lost generations of family to fires that have suffered domestic abuse and sexual violence as well. We deliver approximately 17,000 home safety checks across South Wales. They're targeted. People can phone up through an 0800 number and book a home safety check, which is free at the point of delivery. We not only make people and vulnerable people in our community safe from the effects of fire by delivering hardware through smoke detectors, strobe lighting, vibration pillows, fire safe ashtrays, carbon monoxide, but we've also trained our crews to recognise human trafficking, domestic abuse and sexual violence, and we've got a referral pathway. We trained our crews to recognise those that are vulnerable in our communities for slips, trips and falls, and we've got a falls pathway back into our health boards as well. And also we've when our crews are at and over the threshold with our communities, we deliver anti-crime advice on behalf of our police services and smoking cessation advice on behalf of Public Health Wales, but also from a fire safety perspective as well. We run different campaigns throughout the year, electrical safety, etc. We run campaigns in Cardiff and Newport around the nighttime economy and the dangers of persons entering the water, particularly around the bay and the waterways in Cardiff. And we also work extensively through youth programmes such as the Phoenix programmes that works through the pupil referral unit. And we've got 14 fire cadet branches for 14 to 18-year-olds across South Wales as well. We use a lot of those youth intervention programmes at Park Prison, and we work through the Invisible Walls project and programme to work with inmates and their families to make them good and responsible citizens thereafter. Grenfell, I think members would agree, an absolute horrific tragedy that happened only 5 years ago. We, following the tragedy of Grenfell, we carried out a stock condition survey and a survey working with responsible persons on what did the built environment in South Wales look like. We've got over 200 high-rise buildings, and we found over 20 of those high-rise buildings had the same aluminium-clad material on them that tragically Grenfell did as well. We've been working with Welsh Government and through the National Fire Chiefs Council We've still got some premises that haven't been remedied 5 years later, but the most of them have. So that's really changed the dynamic, and we thought that buildings were built in line with building regulations, but we're finding that is not the case in all cases. So looking at our performance figures, I'll just pick a few out here for members. As you can see, these are a comparison from 2003 to last year. We've reduced our operational demand, so the number of operational incidents that we go to, we've reduced by 52%. We've reduced the number of fires by 77%, and accidental dwelling fires in the home we've reduced by 35% as well. And whilst we've got that ratio of 80-20, we have reduced deliberate fires by 81%, but regrettably, we've still got that ratio that we go to more deliberate fires than we do accidental fires. If I look at the other side of the chart for members, it would be wrong of me not to identify some of the figures that are in red, although they are a success story for safety and vulnerable people in our communities. So these what we call special service calls. So they're calls that don't involve a fire, but we respond to and make the scene safer and provide support. So the large animal rescue, bariatric rescue, rope and boat rescues would all fall into that category, and hopefully you can see there's an increase in trend, regrettably, that we're providing more help and support to other agencies and working outside of our statutory duty function also. What I wanted to do here, Chair, I won't dwell on the slides too much, but really to provide members some assurance or to point out some anomalies. The slide on the left, the graph on the left is all operational incidents that we attend. So that's the South Wales macro picture. And then the picture on the right-hand side is the Vale, the micro picture that applies to the Vale. And as you can see, it's a flatter line of improvement, but still a line of improvement across the Vale of Glamorgan for all operational incidents. The same could be said in a very similar pattern for all fires attended. And fatalities is very much something which is regrettable. We've got an ambition for 0 fire deaths across South Wales. Fortunately, the numbers are low, but one is one too many. And as you can see across the last few years, it's fairly flattish across the Vale of Glamorgan. Because the numbers are very low, it can very much skew the percentage figures as well. And then we got injuries from fires. We've seen an increase over the last few years from injuries from fire. And we're conducting some analysis with that. And then what we find out from the analysis with the injuries and the incidents we attend, that very much drives our prevention, early intervention and education programme, but also our social media presence as well. And then you've got accidental dwelling fires, very much a similar position in the Vale as it is across the rest of South Wales. And then just to enclose, if I could, Chair, some future challenges that we've already alluded to. So Chris alluded to industrial action potentially, or the potential with his non-agreement at the national level for the pay award that's been offered by the national employers. For industrial action, for instance, you recall from my earlier slides on the presentation, 47 fire stations, 60 fire engines, and a raft of special appliances. Our business continuity plan is that fact we employ auxiliary firefighters. So these are firefighters that we employ specifically for industrial action and therefore would not be taken or involved in a trade dispute. Our planning assumption is that we've got a private contract for incident commanders, and then we would look to use our auxiliary firefighters to crew up to a maximum of 8 appliances across South Wales. I think we're all familiar, regrettably, with the cost of living crisis, and you know when you hear people making decisions around heat or eat, it is stark, you know, that we are entering into a significantly deep poverty crisis potentially. And as we know from a fire and rescue service perspective and the analysis that we do, the socio-economic demographic across South Wales causes us some concern, and fire does discriminate, and if you live in poverty you have more chance of having a fire in your home and certainly being injured as a result of that. So we're very mindful of that, and when times are tough, people make very difficult decisions and can embark on more risky activities as well. So stuff that we're picking up here around electrical blankets, people using candles, maybe out-of-date heaters and things like that is very much on our radar. Governance and funding, we got devolved to Welsh Government in 2004. There's been perpetual discussion that's gone on around the single service for Wales. Is the structure right? Is the governance right? Or is how we are funded right as well? There was a white paper came up for Welsh Government probably about 4 years ago. That's been retracted, and the Minister stands by the fact that the governance and funding reforms are certainly not within her ambition for the Welsh Fire and Rescue Services. Welsh Government do have an ambition though, and that's firefighters across Wales do more to assist our NHS colleagues. So currently within the job description and role map of the firefighter is not responding to medical emergencies in support of our ambulance colleagues. So responding to cardiac arrest, for instance, or non-injured fallers in the community. There's a lot of work going on across the services and with Welsh Government. It is an ambition for Welsh Government, but it would need a negotiated change of terms and conditions with the representative bodies to achieve that. And then we're looking at climate change. As a service, we regrettably get hit with the two ends of the climate change. So the warm, dry spring, summer, we see a higher prevalence of fires, certainly wildfires, and as we've seen across the UK this year. Particularly in areas like London that we've never seen before, swathes of wildfires that have needed tackling by numerous quantities of crews. And then we get the wet winters and autumns and storm damage that we've seen over the last few years as well. So something that is really important to us. And then the aging population changes. So we see in population increases, and we see in an aging population increase. So an aging population comes with its care and complexity needs around mobility, dementia, mental health, and things like that. And they are all risk indices for us as a fire and rescue service. I'll unshare my screen, Chair, and Chris and I are more than prepared to take any questions. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very both for that detailed and informative presentation. Do we have any questions, please? If you could raise your yellow hands and we can ask some questions. Councillor Norman, please, would you like to ask your question?
Evening, gents. During the summer now, we've had a bit of a water shortage in South Wales, and there has been some reports of fires not happening perhaps in your area, but there hasn't been enough water pressure to perhaps put the fire out. Is it something I know maybe on a low priority, but is it something you guys are concerned with these days, with the amount of water consumption and the apparatus in the area is sufficient for the demand?
Thanks, Councillor Norman. I guess that the quantity of water that we may or not require will depend on the size and magnitude of the incident or of the incident that we do attend. You're right. There are concerns around water pressure, but we have got pumps, so the ability for us to draw water off the mains and put that pressure into the system, i.e., our firefighting system, is available to us through us using our fire appliances and the pumps that are fitted on it. Plus, as well, we've got six water bowsers which carry anywhere between 18,000 litres and 9,000 litres of water between them, and we've got a disposition of them across South Wales. So where we do have a larger fire, we can draw off the mains and fill these appliances up ourselves. Plus, as well, we've got the ability to pump from reservoirs, pools, and rivers ourselves as well. So from an open water source, we've got sufficient flexibility for the water that we could or should not have. But at any large incident, managing water is always a challenge.
Thank you for answering that question.
Any other questions that we have? Councillor Wilson, your hand was up at the beginning, but I think it's gone. Did you want to say anything?
Yes, I do. And thank you very much for that very illuminating presentation. I think you really well encapsulated what the fire service does. But I think you're also underselling yourself a bit, because I know how much work you do as a first responder as well. And I'm just wondering, perhaps, you're talking about income. I mean, do you get much money from the health service when you respond? Because you do help out an awful lot there. I'm just wondering if you do.
I'll let Chris answer that from a finance perspective, but I think from an operational perspective, no, we don't. So we don't charge for our services. In fact, the charging order for things that we can charge for is quite narrow and quite tight as well. So, you know, the decisions that we presented to our fire authority for them to use their discretionary function is all about providing a better service for our communities. And at the heart of all our decision making is always what more can we do to make our community safer? And that might be working with and through others, or it might be doing stuff on our own as well. So we're very proud of our collaborative history. But no, we don't charge. I don't know if Chris wants to pick up on the ability to charge.
Yeah, not so much the ability to charge you, but just on the general question about funding. I think one of our other council meetings, the question was asked around things like COVID, for instance, and like yourselves, there was a scheme in place where the fire authority could recover costs incurred as a result of the COVID pandemic, for instance. So these things have been done in the past where we've been able to tap into resources to offset some of the costs on that front. But as he was indicated, generally speaking, we don't have the ability to recover costs directly from the health service for that type of work. I think the ongoing discussion is there, however, that if Welsh Government aspirations to fundamentally change the service and the way it operates did come into play, I think the fire service would clearly be saying, and I'm sure the funding authorities would be echoing it as well, that there needs to be some funding adjustment to actually accommodate that.
I think, Chris, if I could, Chair, just come back on that. I think Chris has just captured that. So on one of my closing slides, I think I said about Welsh Government's ambition around firefighters maybe going to cardiac arrest calls. And we've got some really good data from the trials that we ran back in 2015 on that. The nub of that is a negotiated settlement with the trade unions. And I guess, you know, the trade union representatives representing their members, if they have any change in job description or job role, then I guess a remunerated package would need to come with that. Now, if we are paying that out in some way, we need to recover that cost from somewhere. And as Chris said, that would probably be seen to be unfair for our local authority funders and colleagues to be able to fund that for us. So there would need to be a directed funded position from NHS Wales into the Welsh Fire and Rescue Services. I would foresee as that being a solution to that one.
I'll say thank you very much for that response.
Okay, well, thank you. I can't see any more hands up, any more questions. Yeah, Councillor Drake.
No, I was just going to say, as Deputy Chair of the Fire Authority, I want to thank you and Chris for putting this very good presentation together. I can't expand on this as everything was so well laid out going forward, and fingers crossed things will not deteriorate too much. Fingers crossed. But one thing I did find out the other day, which you learn something every day, is that fires in electric vehicles are more difficult to put out than in petrol and diesel vehicles. I only found that out the other day, and it's a total different process. But I believe our South Wales Fire and Rescue Service is one of the best in Britain and deliver an excellent service, and well done to you all. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drake, and thank you, Hugh, and thank you, Chris, for your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
And
have a nice evening.
You're free to leave if you wish.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, if we go to agenda item 5, South Wales Police Service verbal update. I think we've got Inspector Mark Henderson. Good evening, Mark.
He's on
Yes,
the
good
line.
evening. Thank you for
Hello.
having me.
Sorry, Mark, just to, can I just quickly clarify with the committee, in terms of the presentation we've just had, are you happy to have a recommendation that's thanking officers and noting the presentation content?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
am I
fine.
happy? Can I take chair as moving and vice as seconding?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Amy. Sorry, Mark. Would you like to continue with your update, please?
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. I'm not technically able at the fire brigade to share my screen and everything with you. I was very impressed with their technical expertise, so I'll just have to give the verbal update. I'm going to give an update reference to the last 3 months operational matters for Barry and the Vale policing. Firstly, I know Stuart would have mentioned it, the last one, we're continuing with Operation Usk, which is targeting organised crime groups within Barry and the Vale. 12 suspects who've been arrested and charged with money laundering. They've laundered approximately £6.5 million illegally. They've been selling illicit tobacco, other goods, drugs. The money laundering, the Welsh National Money Laundering Team has seized over £1 million worth of assets and cash from them. And the trial for this is coming up in February, so you may see that in the press. Operation Taxus is an extension of USK, so it's again multi-agency working with disruption teams and the shared regulatory services, conducting enforcement operations. On the 6th of October, we seized £125 worth of assets from 4 persons who were also charged with money laundering and drug supply. Operation Papaya, we had information from the border services about a male importing GHB into the country, which is obviously the date rape drug. We did action around that. He's been arrested and charged and remanded with quite a few possession drugs with intent to supply. We seized £20,000 worth of assets from him, and I think it's probably our first crystal meth supply charge we've had in South Wales Police ever. We've run operations, 3 operations with the British Transport Police targeting county lines because we realised that drugs were coming into Barry and the Vale via the train service from Cardiff, so we've done operations with them. We've had road trader operations running again with the local authority, visiting the streets and the vulnerable people to make sure that they're not being preyed on. We've had a lot of complaints around speeding, especially in the rural Vale, so we've had our road policing units in the area and we've run operations around seatbelts, mobile phone usage, speeding. Our main areas for ASB are Holton Road, King Square and Chickenwood Park in Barry. So we've run operations targeting those, especially coming up to Christmas time. Holton Road is going to be obviously a little bit busier because it's our sort of main town centre. I think Stuart last time probably talked about Elstree, but the results of Elstree, that was the operation targeting ASB and crime along the coastline during the summer months. It saw a massive reduction in ASB on last year. So yeah, that was what we would call a successful operation. I'm quite obviously wary that Barry draws a lot of the resources, so we've made sure that we have been running ASB operations in Lantwick and Cowbridge in the rural Vale. Tom Price out in the Vale with the local authorities managed to prosecute him. He's received the custodial sentence for offences against animals, so that's quite a success this year. One of the PCSOs in the Vale is running a suicide watch. I'm not sure if any of the local councils have been involved in that, but I think probably she's working with national agencies and the Senedd and local community groups to reduce incidents of suicide on the coastal area, because obviously being a very beautiful area, unfortunately does attract people to come and self-harm. And again, trying to concentrate out in the rural Vale, we're running Operation Waxby, as this time of year we see a rise in lamping, which causes a lot of damage to farmers' lands. And you've got people out there running around with weapons. So we've got an operation also targeting that using our force resources, including the drone, motorbikes, that sort of stuff. So we've got a lot of resources into that. That's the update for the last 3 months.
Thank you very much, Mark. Have we got any questions to ask this evening? Anybody? Councillor Norman.
My question is about since COVID, there seems to be a bit more reckless driving around the place, is my observation. And I notice around where we live in Boverton and Atlantic region, there's quite a bit of speeding on some of the minor roads. I know perhaps this will be overcome when they reduce the speed limit, but do you think that the people are perhaps forgotten how to drive?
To be honest, I haven't seen any evidence of that. We haven't seen any worsening in standards or increase of prosecutions, but certainly, you know, the communities are our eyes and ears. So, you know, you would likely see things before we do, to be honest. So there are ways we can sort of target that. Obviously, you've given me this information now. You know, we've got the safety van, we've got the community speeding schemes. The community speeding scheme is on hold at the moment due to health and safety reasons. They need a new risk assessment. Once that's done and okayed, that will be up and running. And I know they're quite popular out in the rural Vale because the communities like to sort of take ownership there and do their own speed watch.
Another question is, on some areas in the Vale, you do see that there is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in place. But I've noticed myself that I've been travelling round and people are actually overtaking you in the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So it's quite sad that is happening. That's all I would like to say, really.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Trousdale, please.
It's not a question, really. It's a comment about antisocial behaviour. We've had a lot of problems in Cowbridge, and as a result of activities by the local police and the PCSO, it's been reduced quite heavily, and we're very pleased to see it. And action has been taken against petrol drug dealers, and we've seen a big reduction in that. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and a good bit of news for you is we've finally moved into the police room in Cowbridge Police Station, in Cowbridge Fire Station. So we'll have a bit more of a presence in Cowbridge going forward. It's taken us ages to get that room up and running, but yeah, it is now. So thanks for the good feedback, and that's a bit of extra good news for you.
That's good news. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carl Hadley, would you like to ask your question, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
My concern is on the A48, motorcycles come along at very, very high speeds, and the noise that comes from them, you can hear it. Colwinston is my village, and you can hear it quite often the other side of Colwinston, so that's over a mile away, and the sheer volume of them is quite frightening when you get close up to it. Is there something you can do about it? Surely there's a limit, is there, on yes?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you'd paused then. Yeah, there is a limit. Obviously, there's offences relating to excess noise from motor vehicles. This would be something I'd have to get the roads policing unit involved in, to be honest, because of the type of road it is, motorbikes, that sort of stuff. But to be honest, they're always asking because they're a force resource. They're always asking local units for operations and to direct their sort of patrols and stuff. So that's, you know, now you've given this information, I'll suggest to them that they can spend some time there. Is there any sort of times in particular, or is it probably because it's motorbikes, is it the weekends, that sort of stuff?
That's right. It's weekends, but during the day as well, and occasionally it's sometimes in the middle of the night. So for people living at Pentremyrick, it must wake them up. You're talking about well over 100 decibels. So
okay,
yes,
well, that's something we definitely look at. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, would you like to come in, please?
Hi, Mark.
Hiya.
I know that you were when you mentioned to Councillor Norman there about the Go Safe initiative with the speeding controls, especially out in the rural Vale, and it being pulled because of the health and safety aspect of it. That was back in like last July, if I remember correctly. I'm just wondering what the timescale is for bringing that back.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I think everyone here would probably sort of sigh around the amount of time it's taken, because I don't really see what the issue is myself. But you know, I've been encouraging the department who are doing that to hurry it up. But it's not just a police thing. So you know, I can't influence it that much. But Alan Cairns was speaking to me about that, and he's emailed me a couple of times. So it's certainly on my radar and the boss's radar. So I'm hoping a bit of pressure will actually sort of speed it up, you know.
All right, thank you.
And can I ask everybody who's asked their question to lower their yellow hands, please? And can I have Councillor Wilson next?
Yeah, thank you very much. I do have another role on the council in the sense that I'm the cabinet member, which also includes things like speeding. So obviously, I look at it from a perspective of how safe our roads are. And I do think it's important that we do liaise as much as we do with the police in order to reduce the speeds. We all have different roles and responsibilities here. And also, I'm going to be the cabinet member responsible for the implementation of the 20 miles per hour, which is obviously in next September. So it's not very long at all. And obviously, it's a very important area that I know, especially people in the rural Vale, are very interested in, because there's a big discussion going on, especially about some of the narrow roads, which sometimes the national speed limit is there, but really the real speed is a lot lower than that. Even if you just go through locally, not far from where I live, in St Andrews Major, for example, which is often used as a shortcut on the way towards Wenvo, as opposed to using the main roads. You know, there are bits of there you think to yourself, well, you're going too fast, you're doing 30, let alone doing 50 or 60 miles per hour. So clearly, no, there is a need for looking at 20 miles per hour in rural areas. But I know in certain areas, certain drivers will say 20 is way too slow, and in fact is dangerous. So there is going to be, as you know, an exception policy in relation to this. And obviously, I know there's a series of events coming up in the next 5 or 6 months. I also believe it involves community liaison committee. And I think it'd be good, perhaps, if we get the police there as well involved in this as much as possible, because obviously one area we do need to look at is enforcement going forward on this, and to look at these initiatives, because there's no point having 20-mile-per-hour policy if it can't be properly enforced, you know. And I think that is an area where we do need to have a big discussion with South Wales Police and also the other areas of Wales as well, because it's got to be a national thing. It's not just for local authorities to do, although obviously we are doing it. It's got to be consistent throughout the whole of Wales. So I was just wondering, perhaps, do you have a committee involved in yourselves organised to look at this issue?
Yeah, there is a force-wide team looking at it. But yeah, I haven't really got that much knowledge of it, to be honest. I'm waiting for sort of some feedback from them and some dissemination on what we're doing from them, to be honest.
That would be good, perhaps, if we can get that to this committee, just to see what you're doing in the background. That would be helpful.
Okay. If you let me know dates and times of meetings, etc.
Yeah, we will do that. We will do that. I will liaise with Mike Clark, who's also on this call, to discuss that further.
Hi, Mike.
Good idea.
Here, Mike.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark. Councillor Ian Perry, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, I'm just going to sort of go back over what someone else said in Colwinston about motorcycle noise. It's something that we've complained about in St Nicholas and Bonalson previously, and modified exhaust. And for some reason, the query on modified exhaust was referred back to the Vale Glamorgan Council, but I'm sure that's a policing matter, not a Vale Glamorgan Council matter. But we do have an issues on the A48 with motorcycles and other vehicles with modified exhausts, which are incredibly noisy. That's my first point. My second point is about accident reporting. We also had a serious accident in Bonalson where the speed limit is set at the national speed limit last week, involving 2 lorries and a car. But during the active travel consultation period of about a month, we had 1 car demolish a lamppost and 3 vehicles hit the traffic island on the A48. Now, when I've sort of chased up information on those, even though I've got a photograph showing a police officer present, those incidents are not being recorded. the police can find them by searching out the number plate of the vehicle, but unless you've got a number plate, it's not showing up on the statistics. Now, we do have an explanation that it was because no one was apparently injured, but these are incidents where vehicles are ending up on the footway, and there's great concern that one day it will take a person out. I've had an incident, I think it was about 2014, where a driver passed out driving through St Nicholas and drove about 30 metres along the footway before it came to rest with no wheels on his vehicle in the bus lay-by. So we do have those concerns on the A48. And referring also to the Alec from Cowbridge mentioned antisocial behaviour improving Cowbridge. It doesn't seem to be improving at the moment in St Nicholas, where we still have instances of antisocial behaviour occasionally during the day, but mostly between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., where the children are still continuing to play Knock Knock Run, which is something that is celebrated by KFC and our local radio station, Nation Radio, shamefully. How they can put that on a radio advert and say it's fun, I don't know, but obviously still causing major distress to some of my residents. I have seen that the police officers are around and about much more now than the past, but I'm just wondering what still can be done to tackle this, and what the schools are doing as well.
Okay, you know, I can't really answer for the schools, etc., but I would suggest that these matters aren't being reported to us. And I totally understand why people don't report them, because they may think, what are they going to do? They're not going to do anything, or they may think that hanging on the phone to 101 for, you know, however long is not worth the time. But you can report things in many different ways now. So especially online is a very good way of reporting things. So if you can tell your local constituents if they are experiencing antisocial behaviour, if they can report it, you know, probably online would be the easiest way, because that'll give us a proper picture. And because I come to sort of meetings like this, and I do go away with a lot of new information that I wasn't aware of, because people don't report. And I know it's a pain for people to, you know, hang on the phone, etc., but yeah, we need that true picture. So now you've told me this here, I'll certainly direct patrols in the relevant hours to that area. But in the long term, we do need to have that sort of information to hand, because, you know, I have to distribute my sort of staff as demand dictates. And of course, if people aren't phoning it in to me, or us, sorry, you know, that won't happen. But yeah, I've certainly got a better picture now from this meeting of what's going on, which is always the way, which is why, you know, why I come to these sort of meetings. But in the long term, people do need to report it, so we've got a true picture of what's going on.
Yeah, locally we are encouraging people to go online, because the wait on 101 can be hours.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
locally encourage them to go online. Not everybody here, of course, is online. We do have older residents who still don't have the internet, as they were telling me just today. Yeah. So it is a problem being able to report, and then of course people have multiple incidents and might only report it once, even though it's happened several times.
Okay, well that's a good point, to be honest. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Not everyone can do it online, can they?
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Perry. Can I ask Councillor Keith Hatton, please, to ask his question?
It's now raised from the previous discussions. Following on from what Ian said, we had an incident on election day last May where I'm a trustee of a local library, and we had a break-in to a store. And fortunately, the local PCSO was actually around. I asked him to come over to investigate, and he said he couldn't, because we had to ring 101 to report it, and then he had to be told to attend the incident. In fact, because I know him quite well, he actually looked at it, but then about half an hour later, he had the call to say he should respond, but if he felt that there was no chance of a conviction, he should just drop it. There was a CCTV actually on this individual, but unfortunately, when we looked at the camera, he was wearing a hoodie and a mask, so obviously, you know, couldn't be identified. So that's one point. Can you confirm, in fact, that local PCSOs cannot respond to local incidents? If approached, they have to have permission from a higher authority, i.e. 101. And then the other point is, I know this is a bit of a crystal ball job, but you know, with the cost of living increases, we're told by Westminster that in fact, you know, there's more investment in police officers around the country. Do you actually fear that in fact you may be losing officers? We currently have two PCSOs in Dinas Powys, and they're absolutely excellent. We have an initiative with them where they, once a month they come into our local library for a cuppa with a copper initiative, and we have a lot of people popping in. But I was alarmed last time they came to be told that one of them, in fact, has got promotion. She's going into the Home Office in Cardiff, and the other PCSO felt that she wasn't going to be replaced. Those are my comments. I'd love to get your responses, Mark.
Yeah, well, the first one about the officer not being able to respond to something as and when they're there. I mean, to be honest, that's I'll be frank, that's as ridiculous as it sounds. That's not the case at all. I'm not sure if there's been a misunderstanding, but no, officers are well equipped and know if something happens in front of them, they can deal with it, because it's inefficient and ineffective and a little bit ridiculous to say you've got to phone 101 and then I'll respond in half an hour. So I'm not sure what happened there. I'll be interested to find out which the PCSO was, because you said you know them. So I'd be interested to get their details. And
Yes, I do. And to be fair to him, he's actually very, very good. And he ignored the fact that that's what he was supposed to do, and actually looked at the situation. But I'm just saying, half an hour later, he got the call. But he's actually been telling residents that this is the process, which, as you say, is ridiculous. And I'd just like a clarification on that.
No, it's definitely not the process at all. That's no, not at all. So I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, off the meeting, off screen, whatever, let me know who it is. I'll sort of have a discussion with him, just to raise their awareness, really.
Okay, if I can just jump in there, if Councillor Hatton can contact Amy with the details, and then Amy can link up with Mark, is that okay? There we go. Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. That's fine. And then with regards to the sort of numbers, you know, this is obviously quite a strategic question, but I'm aware that we're recruiting now 400 police officers because of Home Office money. We've been given that target, and it's got to be done pretty soon. I know there's a process ongoing at the moment. Some of those positions will be filled with PCSOs because for some of them it's an aspiration, for others it's not. PCSOs will always be replaced, and in fact the Welsh Assembly government are invested in them and giving us more PCSOs. So I don't know where all the money's coming from. That's none of my business. It's a very strategic question, but yeah, we've been promised these additional resources, and certainly with the PCSOs, we will be getting extra. And from this sort of conversation, I think some of my staff may not be as well informed as perhaps they should be, or perhaps their personal feelings are influencing what they're saying, but they're certainly not the case.
Thank you, Mark.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Hatton. Can I ask Councillor Buckley to ask his question, please?
Good evening, Mark. A question for you on the 20-mile-an-hour limit. I think as it stands at the moment, in the highway code, other than 30 mile an hour, speed limit should be on repeater signs every alternate lamppost. Will they be rewriting the highway code so that 20 is the default unless you see repeater ones, or will we as a council be expected to put road signs up in there? If you don't know, I'm going
to say, can I phone a friend, or this isn't my mastermind topic. I've been a detective for most of my service, so I'm really sorry. I don't have a clue, but I can certainly take that question away and ask and find out.
Sorry, mate. I was just abusing a bit of your time. I wondered if you had an answer.
Sorry, buddy.
And thank you anyway. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buckley. We've got a presentation from Mike Clogg on it later, so Mike might know the answer. We'll ask him when he's got the presentation. And Councillor, they're jumping around. Councillor Trousdale, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just very briefly to go back to what Ian was saying earlier on about reporting incidents. We have encouraged people locally, and I think as a result of that, we've reduced the amount of antisocial behaviour. There were shouldn't say that word, whatever we're supposed to call them, youth misbehaving outside the library. And I went in and said, are you aware of all that? And she said, oh yes. He said, it's happening all the time. So why don't you report it? Well, we did once. I said, but if you don't keep reporting what it happens, nothing's going to happen. So they started ringing up, and then that's now stopped. The same with one of the local Chinese takeaways. Guys were throwing stuff at the windows and everything else. And have you reported it? No. Well, then it doesn't get recorded. If it's not recorded, nobody's going to do anything about it. I hadn't thought of that. So encouraging people to report is very important. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Yes, it is. It builds a picture, doesn't it, for everybody, and especially yourself, Mark, there with 101 or emailing in, then it is helpful to build up a picture of that.
And just so you're aware, the local authority, they work within Barry Police Station. They have access to our systems. So the reporting to us helps the local authority as well, because a lot of stuff gets reported to us that perhaps is local authority business. So yeah, we work with them together. So yeah, so it gives us all a better picture, like you said. So yeah,
absolutely. Okay, the last question is coming up from Councillor Rich, please. But can I ask everybody to lower their yellow hands after they've asked the question? So Councillor Rich, please.
Good evening, Mark.
Hiya.
Hi. As retired PCSO for Cowbridge and Rural Vale, do you want me to come back?
I recognise your name. Hello, Sean. You okay?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to say that I do appreciate that everything that the police are doing, and I think I know better than most here the demand on the resources that you've got, and I would like to say thank you for those that I know are working their socks off in the Rural Vale, trying to make sure that everybody is safe. And that's yeah, I'd love to come back.
Well, just so it's a bit of reassurance for the Rural Vale. Obviously, we've nearly fully staffed the empty out there. We've still got a couple of posts to fill. So once we've done that, that'll be a good thing. But also the response teams now are coming up to their full strength. So we'll be able to have like a dedicated rural car. So that should provide a better service for the Rural Vale, because it's something that we've been struggling to do for a while, because obviously because of the demand of Barry, all our resources are sort of brought into Barry. So that's just for sort of the forum's information.
That's great, and good luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. I've got Councillor Norman, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask a very quick question?
Yes, hello, Mark. It's just a quick question and give you some positive feedback, because you do get a bit of negativity. Last May, I couldn't get an answer from an elderly relative in Llanthony Major. Got round and could see that the inside door was open, so we called the police, but your guys are absolutely wonderful when they came out. They had to break in. The lady was on the floor and been there for a number of days. Sadly, when she went to hospital, she died. But all I can say is your guys were superb on that day.
Okay, well, thanks very much for the feedback. I'll feed that back. That's appreciated.
That's good to end up on 2 positive comments, Mark. So thank you. Thank you very much for your verbal update, and we very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are you okay, Amy?
Yeah, happy to move with note, Chair.
Yes, happy to move.
Could I have a seconder, please?
Have we got a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Hatton. There we go. Lovely. Thank you.
Sorry, could I have an elected member seconding as well, please?
Ah, sorry.
I'm happy to
I'll second it, Amy.
There we are, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I second it.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 6 is a request from Landdock Community Council regarding the traffic speeds. And this is going to be presented by Mike Clogg. Evening, Mike.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Yes, thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. Perhaps just to mention, I was listening to a few of the questions that were asked to Mark Henderson. I might be able to assist with a few answers to some of those questions, but perhaps I'll run through the presentation that I've got first, and we can pick up with those perhaps towards the end. I've got a presentation to share, so I'll try and put that up on the screen and start the slideshow, hopefully. So can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So yeah, the presentation is just around the community concerns over traffic speeds. Generally for around the Vale of Glamorgan communities, but I think there was an emphasis regarding Leckwith and Penland Road. So just moving on, first of all, just to give a little bit of background and just say that car ownership and usage appears to be increasing, possibly an effect of COVID maybe, and people not returning to public transport, and that those numbers haven't fully recovered yet. But I suspect the situation is fairly complex as to why people choose to use cars. Obviously, we'd love to have people thinking about active travel an awful lot more. So Council regularly receives concerns from local residents regarding road safety, not just local residents, but community councils and ward members as well, regarding speeding, and we try and investigate those as best we can. Some concerns that I'm aware of that have been raised recently by communities in Llanmaes, East Aberthaw, Wick and Dinas Powys. I'm sure there are more, but those are some that I'm specifically aware of. The council has a limited resource within its traffic team to investigate concerns. Therefore, the investigations need to be prioritised, as I'll perhaps run through as part of the presentation. And finally, just to make a note that the Vale has been taking part in the Welsh Government 20-mile-an-hour pilot scheme, which was undertaken in St Bride's Major, and the monitoring and evaluation of that particular pilot, as with, I think it's there are 7 or 8 pilots in total throughout Wales, is ongoing, and we have regular meetings with Welsh Government and their consultant TFW regarding that pilot. And just perhaps to pick up on one thing that was mentioned to Mark in terms of police enforcement, they have looked at police enforcement or enforcement activities as part of that pilot, and I think some of the work undertaken will feed back into trying to help identify what the best method and will be to undertake enforcement when the whole 20-mile-an-hour pilot scheme is implemented post-September 2023. So if I move on, and just wanted to really give a bit of an update on council requirements and duties in respect of road safety and speeding. The first thing to say is the council, as a local highway authority, has a statutory duty under section 39 of the Road Traffic Act to take steps both to reduce and prevent accidents. We do this by analysing collision data, which I'll go through as part of this presentation. And obviously we do that as far as reasonably practical, and as far as subject to any budget restrictions that we might have as well. The council has powers under the Road Traffic Act, Regulation Act 1984, to set speed limits on its local highway network in accordance with relevant guidance. But I would make the point that we do not have powers of speed enforcement, and that does fall to the police, which I'll probably pick up on again a bit later in the presentation. And I think Mark also referred when he was speaking that they have been undertaking some speed enforcement because of concerns raised in the rural Vale. So just to say that the Welsh Government guidance in relation to setting speed limits is called Setting Local Speed Limits in Wales, and this is under review due to the proposed 20-mile-an-hour default speed introduction. So I'm not sure when the new guidance is going to be published. We're hoping towards the end of the calendar year, but we haven't got any specific clarification as yet. And just one other point to make is that speed limits should be evidence-led and self-explaining, and they should encourage self-compliance wherever practicable. So the other thing that we do as a council, we undertake road safety education, and that again is as part of Section 39 of the Road Traffic Act, and that involves curb craft in schools, child road safety. We do cycle training, or we undertake cycle training in local schools. We're involved in something called Pass Plus Cymru, and that's driver awareness, driver training for older pupils. And we have in the past been involved in Bike Safe Wales, motorcycle training and awareness. So there's various activities we're involved in there. And finally, on this slide, just to say that we make every effort to consider and investigate all road safety issues subject to appropriate resource. And we generally do that by looking at collision histories. But again, that's something I'll come on to as I'm running through the presentation. I just wanted to skip through police responsibilities. Hope I'm not stepping too much on Mark's toes on this one, but I thought it was relevant just to make the various points. So the police enforce road traffic laws and have sole powers to deal with traffic speed or speed enforcement, as I mentioned previously. Parking enforcement is the responsibility of the council, and we undertake that as best we can, given the resources and priorities at any one time. And just to mention as well, the police are responsible for highway obstruction. That's when your vehicles can't progress potentially along a highway, or even if a footway is obstructed and preventing pedestrian movement or safe pedestrian movement. So you see there, I've just reiterated speed enforcement is the police responsibility, and generally when we receive concerns, we do consider the collision history of a particular road, but generally that speed enforcement is referred to South Wales Police, or we refer the public or whoever is reporting the concerns to report the situation to South Wales Police in the first instance. So speed camera enforcement is undertaken by GoSafe. GoSafe are the Wales Casualty Reduction Partnership. Their primary aim is to make Welsh roads safer by reducing road casualties, and they use static speed cameras and camera enforcement vehicles at specific locations on the highway in order to undertake speed enforcement. They can be contacted direct for requests by communities and individuals asking for speed enforcement, and you can do that via their website. And finally, the police, just to make the point, mentioned collisions, but the police are the lead agency to record and collate collisions. And just perhaps to pick up on another point that was talked about when Mark was taking questions, the damage-only collisions, which we do see an awful lot of around the Vale, and unfortunately we do have a lot of highways assets damaged by collisions, damage-only collisions. There's no legal requirement for those damage-only collisions to be reported to the police, and therefore a lot of them do go unrecorded, and certainly the police will not put the resource in to investigate them or to take details as they would when there's an injury collision. It certainly causes us a great deal of concern, because any damage to highway infrastructure results in a strain on our resources, and ultimately costs to the council in order to repair that, unless we can actually identify the perpetrator through a registration number or other means. So moving on to road safety data and analysis, I thought it would be pertinent just to let you know how we go about this. The data collected following a collision is referred to as Stats 19 data, and we rely on good quality, accurate data, which is essential to collision investigation and to undertaking our statutory function, as I mentioned in one of the previous slides. The collision data is collected by the police, as I've mentioned previously, as part of their highway duties. Data provided by the data is provided to Welsh Government by the police for their validation, and the Welsh Government then issue that to local authorities. That data is normally issued, or it should be issued, on a quarterly basis to local authorities. Unfortunately, there are normally delays in receiving the information, and I'm assuming that's down to Welsh Government resources. So the time frame when we as a local authority get that data can be something like 9 to 12 months down the line. Obviously, that does interfere with us and delay us undertaking our collision analysis and looking at specific issues on the highway. The council routinely review the Stats 19 data or collision data to comply with its statutory duty and responsibility, as I've referred. I think it's just important to understand that not all road collisions are the result of speed, and many turn out to be the result of driver error and perhaps what I didn't mention when I was talking about damage-only incidents, where we have highways assets damaged. A lot of the reason that people perhaps don't report that is that they may be under the influence when they have those collisions, and obviously they don't want the police involved in those sort of situations. Okay, so moving on to investigation of speed concerns. The collision or the council consider the collision history of a particular road when we get any concerns brought to our attention, and we do look at a period over the last 3 years based on the Stats 19 data that we receive from the Welsh Government, and that's based on a period of the last 3 years of actual data that we have, so it can be a little way behind, but it is relevant all the same. Where there are no collisions involving serious injury relating to speed, we generally refer the public to report speeds to the police, as I've previously said. And again, as I've previously said, speed enforcement is the sole responsibility of the South Wales Police, and we are unable to undertake any speed enforcement activity as a local council. We don't have those specific duties. Again, where there are no collisions, we regularly advise that Go Safe can be contacted to request speed enforcement. The one thing I would say is that Go Safe, again, they are a speed or a casualty reduction partnership, and again, they've got specific criteria where they cite enforcement cameras and vehicles. And if anyone wants further details on that, it can be found on the Go Safe website. There's also, and I think it's been mentioned again with when Mark was on, there is a community speed watch scheme, which again we do recommend individuals consider. It can be accessed through the Go Safe website, and I know a lot of communities have taken up the opportunity to set up a community speed watch campaign, and it can be very helpful in addressing concerns in local communities, particularly rural communities. So we do recommend that as a way forward. I just probably would note that Mark said that the community speed watch is suspended at the moment, and it is suspended based on undertaking risk assessments. I believe the situation is that there was some concern over conflict between the community speed watch volunteers and motorist drivers. I'm not sure the significance of that conflict. I'm not aware of a specific incident that's occurred, but I believe the South Wales Police felt it was necessary to look at the risk assessments around that. And it's my understanding that they will be suggesting that to reduce any conflict, that any speed watch campaigns or groups, when it does restart, they have the presence of a PCSO or a police officer at the site, which could be problematic in terms of the frequency that perhaps the groups want to undertake their speed watch campaigns. But in any case, we're waiting for, as a council, we're waiting for further information from the police regarding that matter, and certainly we'll wait in a specific date when community speed watch may recommence. Just to finish this slide, traffic calming. There are various types of traffic calming, but where there is a significant history of speed-related collisions, in line with the review of RTCs, as I've discussed, and where police and/or Go Safe intervention fails, then the council will look to consider introducing targeted traffic calming measures, but that is subject to budget. And perhaps we'll pick up on that a bit further in the presentation, and I'll obviously make you aware of some of the types of traffic calming that could be considered. So just to continue the theme of investigation of speed concerns, traffic calming measures can be expensive to introduce, depending on the type that is required, and the council has very limited budgets to undertake road safety improvements each year. The council primarily relies on grants from Welsh Government, from the Welsh Government. Unfortunately, such schemes compete for Welsh Government funding, where most, if not all, in all cases, only the most severe locations are awarded funding from the Welsh Government. So, that obviously indicates the difficulties that we have in obtaining monies to make specific improvements. The council, and another issue that we have is the council. We've already accumulated a significant number of road safety schemes, following investigations over many years. Currently, these schemes are awaiting future funding, and so far have not benefited from any traffic calming or interventions, purely because we cannot identify funding to assist or to introduce those measures. So it is a specific problem for us. And we have, as I mentioned, we have many schemes waiting that funding, and we'd like to try and address that, but it is a problem for us. And because we have a number of schemes, then and because of the budget constraint, it is necessary to prioritise any road safety interventions. And again, that is based on the collision analysis that I've previously mentioned in the beginning part of the presentation. So just moving on to types of speed reduction measures, and just to say, we would only introduce speed reduction measures where there's a demonstrable collision history. Again, I think, you know, that's a theme coming up all the time through the presentation, I understand, but it is the situation that you know, because of budget constraints, that is where we are at the moment. And in relation to speed issues, where speed is identified as a contributing factor in the personal injury collisions, you know, the collisions need to identify that speed is a specific factor in order to attract that money. The area is or another consideration is that the area is considered unsuitable for the type and volume of traffic. So we would consider that element as well. So all traffic calming which is identified as required must be implemented in line with guidance and legislation. So there are a number or a couple of specific documents that we have to refer to when we're implementing any specific traffic calming scheme. The other point to make is that the public needs to be consulted as well on any proposed traffic calming before implementation, together with the emergency services and other relevant stakeholders. So that's a requirement under the Highways Act. And finally, just at the bottom of the slide there, you'll see that I've listed some types of traffic calming. So there are various types ranging from simple traffic signs, road markings, gateways to other physical features such as chicanes, traffic islands, road humps and speed cushions, speed tables, and a review of the speed limit is also something that we can use to try and address speeding issues. And the final thing there is electronic speed feedback signs, which can be useful in certain circumstances. So just moving on and being a little bit more specific, because I'm aware that the request was from Landdock Community Council, and the concern was mentioned over Penland Road, I think Leckwith Road. Penland Road is signed at 20 mile an hour. I'm aware that on Penland Road there are 3 existing driver feedback signs to try and encourage compliance with that 20 mile an hour signing. The location of those, people from the Landdock area will probably be aware, but I think there's one just past the hospital entrance. There's one opposite Spencer Drive, and there's a third then on Leckwith Road, towards I think there's the narrowing by the sales car showroom. So those will inevitably assist, or they are a measure that we have used previously to assist with speeding issues. The other thing I would mention is that through Penland Road there are traffic signals. There's a controlled crossing. There's a raised table at Cannon Walk, and the one-way narrowing again at the car sales showroom. And again, all those measures do assist in speed control to some degree or other. Obviously, some measures are more effective than others. Just moving on to the Welsh Government 20 mile an hour default, and perhaps to give some information on this. Hopefully everyone's aware of the proposal by the Welsh Government, but just to clarify, there is a proposal for the 30 mile an hour speed limit to default to 20 on restricted roads. And when I refer to restricted roads, those are roads that are currently 30 mile an hour by virtue of a system of street lighting. The proposal supports the objectives set out in the Wales Transport Strategy 2021, The intention is, and I think there's evidence to suggest that moving to a 20 default speed limit saves lives. It reduces the risk and severity of injuries from collisions, and it makes streets safer for playing, walking and cycling. I'm sure there's plenty of other information on websites out there, the Welsh Government website as well, in relation to the proposals. I can probably try and share that information at a later stage if anyone is interested in those details. Just to say or confirm that the legislation legislation was passed in the Senedd on I think it was in July 2022. So the default 20 is coming forward in September 2023. Again, it's a restricted. It's on restricted roads, and that restricted roads are defined by Section 82 of the Restricted Roads Act. Probably getting a little bit too technical, but I think all you need to know really is that a restricted road is normally identified as a road with a system of street lighting furnished by a means of lamps placed not more than 200 yards apart. So highway authorities can set exceptions to the 20 mile an hour speed limits. These are generally expected to be made on A and B class roads. And as you can appreciate, the A and B class roads are more of a primary routes that would run through the Vale. The Vale's been through a review of its A and B class roads in terms of the 20 mile an hour default, and whilst I can't give you specific details at the moment, I can say that we'll be presenting that information to Cabinet, ward members and community councils through November. I'm not 100% sure if a date has been set for the community council meeting as yet. It may well be the 22nd of November, but that will need to be clarified at some stage. And then finally on this slide, just to reiterate, the 20 mile an hour default will be implemented. The legislation is there and it will take place on the 17th of September 2023. So just moving on to the final slide, and just looking at a little bit of a summary and the future. We're working towards implementing the 20 mile an hour speed limit, default speed limit in September. It is a significant project. There are a lot of things to do, and we are currently looking to appoint relevant contractors and consultants to help us move forward with that project and ensure we get there on time. I suppose one thing I would say is that it's an impossible task to change signs over on the stroke of midnight on the 17th of September. So whereas we will be trying to deal with key roads as a priority, there may be some signing which is not transferred immediately, and there will be an ongoing process after the 17th as we try and ensure all roads have the appropriate signing given the new default speed limit. So we're waiting for revised guidance on setting speed limits, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. As such, we've made a decision that we're not progressing any speed reductions at this time because the guidance is changing. And not only that, there may be new traffic road orders to amend speed limits based on the exception mapping that we've been running through. The only time that we would look to revise a speed limit before the new 20 default comes into into being is if there is a critical safety issue, and that would probably be associated with a serious collision of some description. If it was proved that speeding was indeed the overriding factor in that collision. So we are working with the community in dealing with parking issues on a regular basis and other minor highway safety issues, albeit that the funding is limited. We were promoting highway safety improvements as part of development works wherever practicable. We're looking to improve active travel as well as part of future developments. And just perhaps to highlight that point, again, people in Landock will be aware of the development opposite the car sales showroom, and as part of that development, we're looking at extending the existing 30-mile-an-hour limit further along Leckwith Road to encourage lower speeds in that area. So just to say that we apply for Welsh Government safety grant for funding to implement highway safety schemes to address areas where there are significant road traffic and collisions. That's our primary source of funding. But you know, it is very difficult to attract that funding, and it is based around the collision analysis and collisions that occur on the highway, identifying priority areas for funding in the future. And the final thing I've got on the slide is just a reminder that the sole powers for speed enforcement are with the police and Go Safe. That is the end of my presentation, so thank you for listening. I hope it was useful, and I'm happy to take some questions if that's if I suspect there are a few
questions. Thank you, Mike.
pending.
That was
I'll
very
stop.
informative, and thank you for Landock Community Council as well for that request for consideration for Mike to answer. So I can see I've got two hands up. So if I ask Councillor Hatton to ask his question, please.
Hello, Mike. Not seen you for a while. I hope you're keeping well. This implementation of the 20 MPH, I'm sorry, I apologise if I missed it, but are you supposed to be doing these changes within your existing budgets, or will Welsh Government be funding the works that are required?
Hello, Councillor Hatton. Nice to speak to you again. Yeah, just to say we have had funding from the Welsh Government to assist with the changeover. As you can imagine, there are quite a number of signs, road markings even, that need to be dealt with. We don't feel that the budget is going to be sufficient. We did bid for additional funding, but we were given a reduced amount. So it's likely we will be perhaps going back to the Welsh Government in the future looking for additional funds. But yes, to answer your question, there is funding from the Welsh Government, and we will perhaps be looking to try and improve the grants that have been offered or provided.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's good. Thank you.
And the next question from Mo Misra, please.
Hi, Mike. I'm Mo from Landock. You can hardly see me there. I brought this issue up because I carried out our own speed survey from my front garden because I could see the speed indicator of people coming into Landock through the road narrowing, as you rightly pointed out, and 40% of people were actively greater than 30 miles an hour coming into the village. This between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning and 2 separate days in July. So I really appreciate your presentation and the hope that 20-mile-an-hour zone will actually work. We were considering putting an auto speed unit up, and we were told by Go Safe they didn't support that activity, so that's been ditched at the moment. I'm trying to recruit people for the volunteer speed safety volunteer thing, But as you've noted from the last couple of presentations, that's on hold at the moment because of risk analysis. It's got to be carried out, which is fine. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the 20-mile-an-hour zone and see if that works. And just update you on the developments on Legworth Road. It's part of JU, and that's obviously been suspended because they're in administration. So I expect the 30-mile-an-hour zone going back down towards Legworth will probably be pushed back a bit further. But again, thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate all the information given.
Okay. Thank you, Mo. Thanks for the comments. Yeah, just to, you're correct. Jehu have gone into administration. That's something that we've been in discussions with. There's a number of development sites that we have concerns over, and I suspect you're right that may delay the implementation of the restricted 30-mile-an-hour speed limit beyond their development site. But we're working hard to try and mitigate any issues that result from the administration at the present moment.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nick Hodges, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Shirley Hodges. Sorry, it's we're in the same room.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I'm trying to turn the camera on so you can see me, but it won't work. Hi, Mike. The question I've got is about the default setting of 20 miles an hour. We've got less than a year, and I've noticed that the guidance says that those roads that will remain at 30 miles an hour will be following consultation with the local community. Now, that's quite a big task, I would have thought, and I wonder what the plans are to consult with the local communities. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, I can clarify what the position is there. Obviously, I mentioned through the presentation that we will be having discussions with Cabinet, board members and Community Council through November. Subsequent to that, what we would like to do is then post our exception mapping on Data Map Wales so that the general public can see exactly what our intentions are in relation to the 20 mile an hour. I think it's fair to say that most restricted streets will be residential streets, and all those streets will be defaulting. It's just some of the A and B class roads that we've considered or looked at. We followed and interpreted Welsh Government guidance in relation to what we consider is our appropriate sections of those A and B class roads to actually default to 20. Where they do not default to 20, then they will remain at 30 mile an hour. However, to remain at 30 mile an hour, because a lot of them will be likely on restricted roads where there is a system of street lighting, we will have to progress a traffic road order to retain them at 30 mile an hour. So the public consultation process, as I see it, will take place as part of the traffic road order. And the traffic road orders would look in to try and progress those as early as we can in the new calendar year. And the legal process is that will involve a 21-day public consultation exercise. So that's where the public consultation element would come in from my perspective. Any retention of a 30 mile an hour on an A or B class road would go to a TRO and appropriate public consultation. Hopefully that clarifies your point.
It does, but because of what you've said, I was thinking about how town and community councils respond to planning applications. Do you see town and community councils getting involved in that the same type of way? Because there might be a few of these orders about speed.
Well, you will have the opportunity to comment or make an objection regarding the TRO process and when the public consultation starts, so you can feed back in that regard. We are obviously going to be discussing with Cabinet, ward members and the Community Council. on the exception mapping. The intention is just to advise what the interpretation is from the Welsh Government criteria. I'm sure there's going to be perhaps some differences of opinion throughout, not just community councils, residents. When we go to public consultation, we'll probably have a different opinion regarding the 20 mile an hour default speed limit and where it should be applied. Some will want more 20 mile an hour default or more stretches as 20. Some will not want 20 mile an hour at all. So there will be quite a mixed bag, and I think probably the most appropriate way to deal with that issue on the A and B class roads is again through that public consultation process as part of the TRO. So that is our intention at this moment in time, albeit as I said again, we still have a process to go through in discussing the situation with Cabinet, board members, and I can't really predict at this time as to the outcome of those conversations.
Mike, can I just come in there? Thank you for that, Councillor Hodges. You say the TRO orders, you allow a 21-day consultation.
Yeah.
If that's going to community town councils and they only meet once a month, that's not giving enough time for them to have that and feedback.
Well, that is the standard process, Chair, for all TROs. That's the legal requirement. I've said 21 days. I'm beginning to wonder now. I think it might be actually 28. I'd have to check that. So
28 days would be fine. 21 days is a wee bit short.
I'd need to double check that. It might well be 28. Perhaps I've misled you there slightly, but I'll confirm that and I'll feed back to Amy if that's okay.
Yeah,
just to clarify.
You. Lovely, thank you. Councillor Perry, please.
Hi, good evening again. Yes, so restricted roads, which is going to be like St Nicholas, are going to default to 20 miles an hour. I've got a situation in my ward covers Bombleston, where you have the unrestricted 60 mile an hour past the Albury Arms, where there was a serious accident last week, and then through the village of Bombleston, where it's de-restricted at 40 miles an hour incorrectly. So I think my residents would like to know what is going to happen with Bombleston, because it now seems like we're going to be stuck in Bombleston with a 40 mile an hour when other similar roads are going to be down at 20 miles an hour. So it would be kind of ridiculous when people can do 40 in Bombleston, then crawl at 20 in St Nicholas. What's going to happen there? Can you tell us?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Perry. Just to clarify, I'm not in a position during this meeting to advise what sections of the A and B roads will default or not to 20 mile an hour. Again, that will have to be discussed when we have the appropriate meetings through November. In terms of the 20 mile an hour default, it's accurate to say that any road with a speed limit of 40 mile an hour and above at this moment in time will be out of scope, and therefore the 20 mile an hour default will not apply. However, there is obviously a significant amount of work to do to bring in the 20 mile an hour default, but there will likely be a process after the 20 mile an hour default is brought in, where the Welsh Government will ask us to review all our speed limits on our local highway network. That is a mammoth task, and it will likely take a considerable time, and we likely will need to engage consultants and look at where budgets are coming from to undertake that task. But the answer to your question is effectively anything that is not defaulting to 20 mile an hour in September 2023 or on the 17th of September 2023 will need to be considered in line with the future guidance on setting speed limits, and in line with any future review of speed limits on the local highway network within the Vale.
Thank you, Mike. I don't think we're actually here tonight, Councillor Perry, to go through individual roads. It's just a general update on what is happening in the future. So thank you for your question, but I'm sure that will come out soon. Councillor Campbell, please.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, Councillor Campbell.
Obviously, we've discussed, over email previously that there's a couple of roads within my ward that I'd like to be involved in this scheme. But we don't have a community council or a town council. And I know that you've put a lot of onus on them having a say in regards to the exception. So as an elected member, am I going to have to wait for the potential of the TRO to come out to have a say if there's a road that we want to be 20? Or will I be able to have a say before that when the town and community councils do?
I'm going to have to give this some consideration, Councillor Campbell. Appreciate that there's no community council, and we need to ensure that the community in that area understand what the proposals are for 20-mile-an-hour default in that particular area. If you can leave that with me, I will take that back and I'll discuss that and see how we deal with that situation, and we'll have to let you know after this meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Amy, did you want to come in there? No, I saw a Democratic hand up.
Yes, Chair, it was just to support Mike with Councillor Campbell's question, because I know that I have provided all of the clerk contact information to Emma Reid in order to set up the consultation meetings with all town and community councils through November, and my understanding is that all elected members would be invited to those sessions as well, because I had made the point about the roofs area not having the community council. So that has already been passed on to the department, Councillor Campbell, but I'm sure Mike will take that forward for you again now after to make sure that you're involved in those sessions throughout November.
Thank you, Amy. Rob Thomas, please. Evening, Rob.
Good evening. Just on that point that Councillor Campbell raised, given that Councillor Campbell actually sits on the Vale of Glamorgan Council as a councillor, I would very much doubt that she would not be informed of any rollout of 20-mile-an-hour limits. Because I guess, Mike, and it's not a question, it's a suggestion that we'd probably, something as significant as this, we'd probably want to take it through Cabinet in any event. Because it's something that probably every local member, whether they sit on the Vale Council or whether they represent a town or a community council, would be interested in. So I'm guessing as this is being rolled out or being considered to be rolled out, the implications of it will be made clear to everybody, whether you're on a town or community council or sitting on the Vale Council.
Rob, absolutely right. And as I probably mentioned previously, we've got presentations that we're undertaking throughout November. We've got a date, first of all, to go to Business Cabinet to explain the process and update them. And then following that, we will be speaking with all ward members to update them before we then move on to have a meeting with the community councils. And then subsequent to the community councils, as I've mentioned, we would be looking to place the exceptions mapping that we've undertaken on Data Map Wales. So then it would be in the public domain, and then all the public would be aware of our proposals, albeit, as I've perhaps explained to Councillor Hodges previously, the intention would be that the TRO process would form part of the public public consultation, where we get feedback and consider particular concerns at that time. Albeit, again, we still have that process to go through with Business Cabinet and with ward members, and I can't predict what the discussions are going to be and the outcomes are going to be from those discussions. So things may change slightly. I'm not aware.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, can we note this presentation with the added footnote of perhaps noting our concern about the default to 20 miles an hour within a year, and how we're going to be able to consult with all the communities. Would everybody be happy with that? Okay, so
Yes, indeed.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your presentation, and feel free to leave.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, can I just pick up on
Yeah.
one thing? I just recall there was a question asked about the repeater signs for 20 mile an hour
Oh, yeah.
on restricted roads. Just to clarify the situation, that whereas at this present moment in time for 30 mile an hour roads, where there's a system of street lighting, there are no repeaters required, and in actual fact it would be illegal to place a repeater on a 30 mile an hour stretch of road where there is a system of street lighting. That will be the case for 20 mile an hours when the default 20 is introduced, i.e. 20 mile an hour sections of road in a series of street lighting will not require repeaters, but where 20 mile an hours are implemented through a traffic road order and not on restricted section of road, then 20 mile an hour repeaters will be required. Similarly, 30 mile an hour roads will require at all times 30 mile an hour repeaters.
Okay, thank you very much for.
Hope that's clear.
And obviously 20 miles an hour will be on the road as well.
Well, we will look at where the road markings need to be placed in order to confirm or to give a further indication that motorists are entering specific speed limits. Yes, that will be part of the process.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, moving on with the agenda, if we can go to agenda item 7, Vale of Glamorgan Public Service Board Annual Report 21 to 22. And we've got Tom. There we go. He's up on the screen. Thank you, Tom.
Sorry, Chair. Just to jump in there. I wasn't clear who had seconded your recommendation on the last report.
I think there were a few, but I'm not sure who.
I couldn't quite catch who the audio was from. Could I have a seconder, please?
I did, Amy. Councillor Campbell.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Tom.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, and good evening, committee. Thanks very much for taking the reference this evening. This is a reference from the Council's Corporate Resources Scrutiny Committee. They're the lead scrutiny committee for the Public Services Board, which was established as part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and it brings together public sector organisations across the Vale of Glamorgan in order to improve the wellbeing of all of our citizens. And this report, Chair, sets out the annual report for 21-22. The PSB has got 4 wellbeing objectives to enable people to get involved, participate in their local communities and shape local services, to reduce poverty, tackle inequalities and that are linked to deprivation, work around giving children the best start in life, and commitments to protect, enhance and value our environment. The report that's before your committee this evening was agreed at the PSB meeting in July of this year, and it sets out a range of activity that's been underway across the last year, particularly honing in on 4 priority areas: the Cardiff and Vale Move More Eat Well plan, work that's been underway around tackling climate change, the Pathfinder project for time banking, and improving engagement work, which is a Pathfinder project. The report is really wide-ranging. It sets out details for each of the objectives and the work streams, including some background work that the PSB has done in the last year or so, what's been achieved, and importantly what the future direction for that work is. I think it's particularly important this year because we're reflecting on the last 4 years since this wellbeing plan was published, and undertaking the work in preparation for the next wellbeing plan that will be published in May of 2023. So this year we've particularly looked at a range of different data, and that's linked in the report, and I'd highlight that for especially for community and town council colleagues, because there's lots of really rich information there about the Vale of Glamorgan, from demographics, information about education and the economy, health and the state of our communities, as well as areas around environment and transport. And it's a really good resource for colleagues to use when looking at particular challenges in their areas. So the development of this annual report has been scrutinised by the Council's Corporate Resources Committee. It will also now inform some of the work of our scrutiny committees and the work of our champions. And I'm really grateful to Town and Community Council colleagues for participating in a series of exchange meetings over the last year or so. They've been established to strengthen the relationship between the Town and Community Councils and the PSB in order that we can improve communication and we can increase the opportunities to exchange ideas. And the last meeting that was held in September was a really useful part of that in terms of road testing the draft objectives that we're going to be setting ourselves on course to consult on now from November until January. And those new wellbeing objectives in draft are a more resilient and greener Vale, a more active and healthier Vale, and a more equitable and connected Vale. And we're looking to take collective action across the sector around a range of work streams. So responding to the climate and nature emergencies, working with the people who live in our communities that experience the highest levels of deprivation, and taking forward commitments to becoming an age-friendly Vale. So in summary, I'd like to just draw committee's attention to the fact that some town and community councils have a duty under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act to show how they're helping to work towards the PSB's wellbeing objectives. In the Vale, those town councils are Barry, Llantrip Major and Penarth, and they publish a report each year that shows how they're contributing to that work. As committee be aware, you've got a representative on the Public Services Board. That's Town Councillor Shirley Hodges from Barry Town Council. And we're very much as a PSB committed to continuing to work with town and community councils in order to take action at a very local level. The town and community councils have, as I say, participated in those exchange meetings, and we'd really encourage you to continue to do that. We'd also be grateful as a PSB if, once the consultation launches on the 7th of November, if as a town and community council you can participate in that consultation. And we're also aware that you've got really good links within your local communities, and we want to hear from as many people as we can. So we'd be really grateful if you could share details of that. And just finally, a second plug for the reports that are included in that annual report that set out a view of the Vale. They're really important sets of information that town and community councils can access to help plan and deliver services very locally. So that's a really quick whistle-stop tour, Chair. I'd obviously be delighted to answer any particular questions that colleagues may have.
Thank you, Tom. Have we got any questions, please, this evening on this report? Yes, we've got one from Councillor Hodges. Or Mrs. Hodges.
It's Mrs. Hodges, thank you.
Sorry.
But all I can add really to what Tom has said is a massive appreciation of the amount of work that the Public Service Board does, and Tom and the team do as well. I would strongly encourage town and community councils to comment on the consultation, and bear in mind that this really is the reaction and the forward planning for the climate and the nature emergencies that have been identified. And I think if you approach it with that at the forefront of your thoughts, all the town and community councils should definitely have some input and something to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alec Trousdale, please.
Hi, Tom. Very quick question, probably a stupid one. Where do I find the report? Is it on the Vale website?
Yes, it's on the PSB's website, Alec. Okay. But what I can do is I'll pop into the chat of this meeting a direct link to the report so that all colleagues can access it really easily.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have any other questions? I can't see any other hands up there, so I don't think we do. So can I just move the recommendations? There are 4 recommendations, if anybody wants me to read them all out, but you should have them all there in your report. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Is everybody happy to accept those recommendations, please? Can I have a seconder to second that? There we go, Alec Trousel, thank you.
If I may clarify, Chair, the 4 recommendations were the original recommendations presented to Cabinet on the Cabinet report. So obviously one of those recommendations was to refer to this committee for consideration. So there would actually be one recommendation for the committee this evening, which is to note the annual report as requested by Cabinet.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, Chair, it's the scrutiny committee that referred the report to you.
Right, okay, lovely. So just, so it's recommendation 1 then. Yeah, and we need a seconder for that. And Councillor Wilson, you're happy to second that?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, and now we need to go on to our final agenda item 8, and it's the Vale of Glamorgan Council's community review. And I believe, Rob, you're taking this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've actually got a slide deck to give to committee just to take us through this. So I don't know, I've got my colleague Rachel on the call, who hopefully will be able to share the slides. But as she's doing that, I'll just refer members of the committee to the report that's attached, which basically gives the background to the community review. And very briefly, before we get into the slides, so the Vale of Glamorgan Council has a principal authority.
Is now exiting.
So I have that effect on people. So the Vale of Glamorgan Council, as a principal authority, has a duty to review the communities within its area every 10 years. And that the legal basis for that is under Section 22 of the Local Government Democracy Wales Act. So the slide deck is on the screen. So Rachel, if you can take us through to the next slide, please. So I've just given you that first bullet point. So our community review was due to commence back in 2019. And there was actually a report to Cabinet in 2018, which was referred on to this committee at the time. And that report actually postponed the review until 2023. That Cabinet report was considered on the 30th of April. That postponement was due to the fact that there was a principal authority, so a Vale of Glamorgan review undertaken at that time as well, and it was actually postponed because of potential confusion with the election that was coming up in 2021-2022. So as a result of that, the review is due to commence in January 2023, which isn't very far away. So if we can go to the next slide. Now, in terms of carrying out the review, the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales can carry out that review on behalf of the Principal Council. The Commission, so when I talk about the Commission, I mean the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission. They have limited capacity to undertake reviews, and as a rule, they undertake about 3 reviews a year. So ours is due to take place next year. And we've actually asked the Commission to undertake the review on our behalf. And that review will run for about a year, year and a half in length in terms of concluding it from the day it starts. So if we go on to the next slide. There are 2 different types of reviews. Now, the one that is relevant in this case is a Section 25 review. What that means is there will be a review of community boundaries within the principal authority area. And the purpose of that review is, to put it simply, to consider if the community boundaries that exist at the moment reflect local identity and allow for convenient and effective local government. So in a sense, it's looking at the boundaries that we've already got and seeing if they have stood the test of time and if they're still fit for purpose. And if they're not fit for purpose, it offers the opportunity to put in place new boundaries for new communities. And and if there are any anomalies as a consequence of changes on the ground. So, for example, new developments, expansions to towns, small developments in rural areas, or other developments within towns, it will look to see if the capacity of those wards within those town councils or community councils are still relevant. So if we go on to the next slide. So basically, that review will commence in January. The end result of that review is there may well be a recommendation for boundary changes to community wards. It may include changes to an existing community. It could also include an abolition of an existing community or the creation of new communities. Now, those words on that slide are words taken from the legislation. So that is basically the status of the review that will be undertaken. We go on to the next one. So once the Section 25 review is completed, automatically then there'll be a consideration as to whether there needs to be a change for electoral arrangements, and that's under the Section 31 of the legislation. So that relates to the number of members of the community council and any arrangements for division of wards within communities. So that includes the number of wards, the boundaries, the names of those wards, and the number of members per ward. So you'll understand from this sort of presentation that the community review can be quite far-reaching. Go on to the next slide. So there are 4 steps when carrying out the review. I would stress that the review has not commenced yet. So what you're having tonight is not part of that review. I would probably call it putting you or giving you notice that the review is coming and giving you an idea of what it'll involve in advance of it actually commencing. So call it sort of pre-consultation or pre-engagement. So there'll be initial publicity. We will have to publicise the review, bring it to the attention of statutory consultees, and draw attention to any directions given by Welsh ministers which are relevant to the review. There is then a period of initial investigation and consultation. That consultation should last between 6 to 12 weeks. And then there'll be draft proposals drawn up, and there'll be a period of consultation on those draft proposals as well. There'll be a report. That report will include details of the review, sets out all the proposals, and the consultation that lasts 6 to 12 weeks. And then there will be a final stage, which is final recommendations, which will be a review of all the proposals. And that will consider any representations made and whether there'll be any changes or no change. I mentioned the statutory or the mandatory consultees, and there's a list on this slide. So the Commission, when they carry out the review, will consult with the Principal Council, so that's the Vale of Glamorgan Council, all the town and community councils across the area, the Senedd members representing the area. I say members because we've got the Senedd member and the regional members. We've got the members of Parliament representing the area, all the elected members of the Principal Council, Welsh Language Commissioner, Welsh Government, and Ordnance Survey. So what do we do first with the review? The role for us as the council, before we hand over to the Boundary Commission, is we have to draw up the terms of reference. And that will be drawn up, and it'll, in a sense, form the basis of how the review will be taken forward. That terms of reference will include 3 distinct elements. One is the timetable. The second element is the procedure and the process to be followed. And then importantly, the indication of what the council size policy is and any policy around grouping of communities. So if we go forward, so in terms of processes and procedures, key processes will involve public consultation on draft proposals. There will be official notices given at different stages of the review. Copies of reports, documents will be deposited at the Council's election office and on the Commission's website, and comments and submissions will be considered during the initial and draft proposal consultation period. So the consultation throughout is an important element of the review. I come now to the Council size policy. Now, I've just mentioned that this is one of the important elements of the terms of reference, and this is about establishing a policy to look at what the relevant size of each community or town council is. The policy will set out the number of electors that a community should include. There will be a minimum number of councillors that should represent each community. So in effect, you will have a floor. So beneath that floor, the number of councillors will not fall beneath that. There could be recommendations that communities could fall into one of three categories. So the council size policy will try and define what is a rural area, what is an urban area, and what is a mixed area. And then the council size policy will also try to define the number of electors to councillor ratio for each of those areas. So what would be the ratio of electors to councillors for an urban area, for a mixed area, and for a rural area? So before I move on to merging, abolition or creation, it's important to stress at this stage that the terms of reference will be consulted upon, and as a consequence, because the council size policy is part of the terms of reference, that will also be consulted upon. So the other considerations, the Commission will look at whether we need to create new communities, abolish existing communities, or merge certain communities. And the names then will also be up for grabs. So are the names of each of those communities where they have wards, are they relevant? Are they up to date? And where there are changes to the boundaries of communities or any community, the number of councillors representing those communities. I don't know what the next slide, yeah. So one thing that's important in the review is that it'll stand the test of time. So the Boundary Commission will pay regard to the number of local government electors in the Vale of Glamorgan as a whole and in each community, the population that's eligible to vote, and that'll be sourced from the mid-year estimates from the Office for National Statistics, and there'll also be 5-year projections, and that'll very much be based on planning permission information in terms of where will there be growth in particular areas of the Vale. That's it, Chair. That basically concludes the slide deck. It basically follows the structure that's in the report before you tonight. So it actually, the purposes of the slides was to actually take you through the report. As I say, a few points for this evening. We haven't started that review, so this is advanced notification, if you like. The intention now is to continue to work up a council size policy and to continue to work up the terms of reference. If you consider the report, and some members may well have read the report and think, where does the cross-party working group sit into all of this? We've got a cross-party working group established in the Vale Council, which has recently met to consider the council size policy and the terms of reference. That is work in progress. And the reason we have a cross-party working group is that is one of the recommendations when framing the terms of reference, that you should have that working group to help across the board, across the council. So happy to try and answer any questions, and I know we've got Rachel here from the elections office as well.
Lovely, thank you, Rob. I can see there's a question from Councillor Hatton. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, so Rob, I can take it with regard to the Vale representation on town and community councils within the Vale. That's done and dusted. That was done recently, wasn't it? So there's no impact on that. We know that there's been a review of Westminster boundaries, and certainly within Dinas Powys, we know that we'll be going in with Cardiff and the South East from July 23. I think I did read somewhere that this review could actually impact upon the village of Dinas Powys actually falling out of the Vale of Glamorgan. I mean, is there any any further information on that? Do you think that's likely, or will we still remain within the Vale of Glamorgan Council, or is that part of the whole process? I don't know.
Yeah, really good question, because you are right. There has been a principal authority area review and there has been a Westminster review. So this, if you like, is the third review to follow. I guess my response to that is that any community review will have to have regard to what's gone before. So in terms of the relevance for Dinas Powys itself, I can't tell you whether it'll fall out of the Vale of Glamorgan and into Cardiff South and Penarth constituency. This review itself is focusing just on those community boundaries. So it'll be focusing in on whether the Dinas Powys Community Council boundary and the wards within Dinas Powys Community Council, whether they're the right wards or not. So it'll look at boundaries, it'll look at the number, the relevance of those boundaries, whether they need changing or not. I don't think the review will be as far-reaching as saying, well, Dinas Powys Community Council will go within Cardiff South and Penarth, because that's a given, because it's already happened. This is focusing in just on the community area. I don't know if that helps or answers your question.
Yes, I think it does, Rob. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just can say that obviously this community review is about the established communities in the Vale of Glamorgan. And you need to be very clear about that, because I think there is a bit of confusion, because as you know, there's been revised proposals just published recently about concerning the boundaries for the electoral constituencies for UK Parliament. And that's a totally different beast in comparison to what we're discussing here. But I'm not at all surprised that members may be a bit confused, especially when areas go from one constituency to another one, and it's still revised proposal. It's not the done deal yet. That hasn't yet been published, and we've still got a consultation on that anyway. But going back to this point about community boundaries, I think one of the interesting things here is about making sure that the communities understand, are they happy where they are in terms of linking in? I mean, obviously, if you think about it from Penarth's perspective, are we happy as Penarth to be within our existing boundaries, or should we think of expanding or even doing the opposite? And it's the same for other areas as well. Do they want to expand their areas, or do they want to retrench to their core village, perhaps, like village identity? And this is something, the community councillors, as well as the Vale councillors, need to discuss. So I do think it's very important in terms of our strategic direction as to what we identify ourselves as.
You've sorry, through you, Chair, you've hit the nail on the head there, because that's exactly what the review will look at. It will look at boundaries on the ground. It'll look at what logic there is to those existing boundaries, if they should be changed, if there's been a change on the ground recently in terms of new developments, in terms of particularly in our towns, whether or indeed are there any changes planned in the next 5 years which could feed into the review. So it's exactly that. It's whether the boundaries are logical or not.
Do we have any other questions, please, from anybody? Councillor Hatton.
It's just a comment, really. I think, Councillor Wilson's intervention there has actually, and Rob, has actually helped me a great deal to understand. Thank you very much.
Rob, if I could ask a question, I was just wondering about the cost of this. How much is this review going to cost? It's over a lengthy time period, and with budgets as they are, is this something that the Vale has got to pay for? Is there money from Welsh Government coming to cover some of this?
No, this is a cost that is ours. We have to carry the cost because the responsibility falls on us. The Boundary Commission has a flat fee, and it's in paragraph 5.2 of the report.
30,000.
So page 4, 13,500 is the flat fee. There'll be translation and printing costs and postage and all that kind of stuff and advertising, and the Boundary Commission will be recharging that to us at cost. And if you look on the top of page 5, paragraph 5.2, that gives you the idea of the costs of all the advertising in terms of publicising the review. Total fees payable will be around about £30,000 to carry out the review, but that is something which we're duty bound to carry because the responsibility is ours.
Right. Okay, thank you. I saw a yellow hand then, but I think that yellow hand has gone. Councillor Hatton, did you want to come back in?
Yes, I do. I mean, with regard to the costs, as you all know, town and community councils are currently undergoing, looking at their draft budgets for next year. I mean, Rob, is it possible that we're going to be asked to meet part of the cost of this, as we had with this additional cost for the last election, which blew our budget handsomely?
I think this is a cost we have to carry, but I'll defer to Rachel if she knows any different. The way I'm reading the regulations and the guidance, this is a cost to us, not yourselves.
Yeah, that's correct, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, you'll be pleased to know, Councillor Hatton, that it's not going to come Dinas Powis's way, or any other community or town council's way.
Thank you for your reassurance.
Lovely. Okay, thank you, Rob. No other questions that I can see then?
It's probably, sorry, Chair, it's probably worth saying one other thing, actually, because when we had our cross-party working group within the council, there's quite clearly, and not surprisingly, a lot of discussion around what the council size policy will actually mean for existing town and community councils in terms of number of elected members. And we had a really useful discussion with the Boundary Commission representative earlier this week. And the council size policy, a lot of people will quite naturally home in on it and think, what does this mean for our community or town council? It will be guidance. So it's not something that will be applied by the letter of the law. It will be merely to guide decisions and recommendations. In the same way, and the representative from the Boundary Commission was quite clear on this, in the same way as will existing numbers of representatives in town and community councils, that will also guide the discussion. So when you see something like a council size policy and you think, what does this mean for us? It will be guidance. It'll be an important document. It'll help guide us, but in the same way, the number of representatives that already sit on town and community councils will also help guide us.
Okay. Yes, food for thought. It'll be interesting couple next 12 to 18 months, won't it? With that in mind, then, if I can thank you, Rob, for that, and can we pass the recommendation that the Community Liaison Committee notes and has regard to the process for and relevant timescales for the Vale of Glamorgan Council's community review scheduled for 2023. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hatton has seconded. Okay, Amy.
And an elected member to second, please, Chair.
And an elected member.
I'm happy to second, Chair. Councillor Cave.
Thank you, Councillor Cave.
Councillor Cave.
Okay, I think that comes to the end of our agenda. Can I just remind everybody that if you want a request for consideration, the forms are available via Amy, via Democratic Services. And to conclude, the next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Thursday, the 19th of January. Okay, so thank you all for attending. There's quite a few people, can't see many people, but thank you for all your questions and your attendance tonight. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sally.
Chair.
Well chaired. Well done.
Thank you.